Okay, we are recording. So now, we're going to find the cosine and the sine of a negative angle. Please give me your attention up here. Please. Nick and Jeff. Eyes up. So, how do I do a negative angle?
Crap, we're doing work.
We're doing work. And you just put that on audio. Yeah, and you just said it again. All right, let's keep it professional. Now, remember, which way did I measure positive angles? I started here, right? I started at the positive x-axis, so over here. And then I went this way. Which way do I call that? Counterclockwise, right. So, to measure a negative angle, Brandon, I start here again, but now instead of going counterclockwise, I go clockwise. Negative angles go the way of the clock. Positive angles go against the clock. Don't know why, it's just the way they decided on it. So, if I go, and I'm going to do this with, let me do my unit circle real quick. Right? And then I do my ray. I go 30 degrees this way, I'm right about there, right? What is my reference angle? Do we remember what the definition of a reference angle is? It goes either up or down to the closest x-axis. So, my reference angle is right here.
Here.
Now, I went 30 degrees in the negative direction, so what is my reference angle? It's 30 degrees. My reference angle is always going to be positive. Reference angle is always positive. Now, if we remember, going back to our 30, 60, 90 triangle, okay, cosine was adjacent over hypotenuse. What was the length of the adjacent side to a 30-degree angle in a right triangle? If I drew my right triangle here, I'll do this in black. And this is my 30 right here. This is my 60, and this is my 90. What's the length of my hypotenuse? 1. What's the length of this side? Square root of what over 2? 3. Good. Square root of 3 over 2. Okay. So the cosine of 30 degrees in this angle is, well, let me erase that because I'm not doing cosine theta. I'm doing cosine of negative 30 degrees equals square root of 3 over, I haven't had enough coffee today, square root of 3 over 2. What about the sine of this angle? Sine of negative 30. What is the length of this side in my 1/2? This is 1/2.
You don't have the poster up like Mr. Erickson.
I don't have the poster up. I do not have the poster up. So therefore, you're required to tap your.
So opposite over hypotenuse.
So remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, exactly. Okay, so this is going to be 1/2. Should this be 1/2? I'm laying a trap for you guys right now, right?
It's those two, so it's not just.
So remember, when it was 30 degrees this way, I was going up 1/2, right? What's that, Kaya? Oh, tell me what your guess was again. negative 1/2. Why? Because it's going down, right? So this equals negative 1/2. So the sine of negative 30 is negative 1/2. Now think about this. I'm going to add a page in here. And actually, let's undo that and do my content. Bam. Okay. Boom, and let's go there. Okay, so if I got my unit circle here, all my, oh, no. This is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Now in quadrant 1, all my sines, all my cosines are positive, right? So sine theta is greater than 0, cosine theta greater than 0. What about in quadrant 2? Sine theta, cosine theta. Are my sines positive or negative? Sines are my y's. So that's up, down, right? So my sines are greater than 0. My cosine is left, right. So less than 0. What about quadrant 3? Both are negative. Why? Because all my x's and y's are negative in the third quadrant. So sine theta is less than 0. Cosine of theta is less than 0. And in the fourth quadrant, Brandon's got this. Sine of theta is less than 0, but cosine of theta is greater than 0. So depending on which quadrant we fall into, that tells me whether it's positive or negative, okay? So let's use this understanding for this one. Find cosine of negative 135 and sine of negative 135. Draw yourself a unit circle, a small one, so you can fit it in there. Draw a small unit circle and figure out what quadrant negative 135 is going to be in. Is it going to be in quadrant 1? Which way am I going from the positive x-axis?
Second quadrant.
No, the cosine isn't necessarily negative. The angle is negative. So, Ryan, which way do I go from this x? Which way do I go when I'm measuring a negative angle? I go clockwise. And how far? Oops.
Oh, it's
So if I go here, how far am I right now? I'm at 90 degrees, so I need to go further, right? I'm not at 90, I'm actually at negative 90, right? So here, I'm where? Negative 180, so I need to back it off a bit, right? Maybe about right there. So there. So we're going to call that negative 135. What quadrant am I in? The third quadrant, right? So is my sine going to be greater than or less than 0? Less than 0 because I'm below the x-axis. I'm in the negative category for my y values. What about my cosine? It's also going to be less than 0. Now, what is my reference angle? I heard it over here. 45. Which one are you measuring? Are you measuring this one or are you measuring this one? The top one, right? It doesn't necessarily matter here because they're both 45, but I always measure to the x-axis for my reference angle. So here, cosine of theta equals, and actually I keep putting theta in, I want to put the angle measure in, the cosine of negative 135 degrees equals, what is the cosine for a 45 degree angle? Remember your right triangle, right? This is a 45, this is a 45, and then the hypotenuse is 1, and each of the legs are root 2 over 2. But for negative 135, I'm going to have a negative sign, I'm going to have a negative cosine. So then it's negative root 2 over 2 for cosine. For sine of negative 135, I'm also going to have a negative root 2 over 2. So now we move on to 1320. This is one of those funky ones where we're going to go around and around and around, right?
First quadrant.
How many times do I go around though, Brandon?
Wait, I'm just kidding. It's the second quadrant.
That's not what I asked.
It's 3 times around.
3 times around? 3 times around is 1080, right?
Yeah. Plus another 180, and then you're at like 1,260. And then you go into the second quadrant, and you're at like 1,030.
I like how you think. So let's do that. First, I'm going to do my unit circle. Okay, I'm going negative degrees, right? So I go around once, I'm at 360, right? I'm going around twice, I'm at 720. I go around a third time, I'm at 1080. Okay? I go another 90. What's 90 plus 1080? That's 1170. 1170 plus another 90. That would be 1260. 1260. And then I got to go another 60 to get to negative 1320. So I'm about there. Now, yeah, I had to go another 60, right, Ryan? So this is my reference angle, and it is 60 degrees. So now, what's my cosine going to be? Is my cosine going to be positive or negative, Sophie? Yes, cosine. Ooh, remember, cosine's my x values. Yep. Negative cosine. What's my sine going to be, Jordan? Positive, because it's above the x-axis. Remember, if I labeled this point right here, actually I'll do it in blue. If I labeled that point is cosine of that angle and the sine of that angle. Right? So cosine's always your x value, and sine is always your y value. Okay? And what is the cosine of 60 degrees? Negative 1/2, right. So cosine of negative 1320 equals negative 1/2. Negative 1/2. And then the sine of negative 1320 is going to be what? It's going to be positive square root of 2 or 3. Can I? Root 3 over 2. And that's positive. Everybody do 2205, negative 2205 on their own. This will be the last exercise that we do before we assign the problem set.